Grave Tone.
Welcome to Grave Tone Podcast, where horror comes to life in every form it takes. I'm Megan.
And I'm Arthur.
And we've got a special episode for you.
Bonus.
Midweek bonus. Is it the middle of the week?
Somewhere.
Okay. It's at some point. We don't know what day it is anymore. We recently sat down with Eric Miller for a chat. For those who are unaware, he is an author and screenwriter of a multitude of different projects. He is a published author of one full-length feature novel from, I want to say, last year, as well as a couple of different collections of short stories, which he edited, one of which was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. And he also is the writer of various different screenplays and rewrites many, I think, uncredited rewrites as far as I understand, including the SyFy Channel Ice Spiders, which I think he's gained like a pretty decent amount of cult popularity for. So that was like a fun one to kind of chat through and everything. But we got to sit down with him and have a chat about books and writing and the film industry.
And behind the scenes.
Yeah. And
everything that he's worked on and the people that he's worked with. He's just like a really super nice guy, very humble, but very giving.
Yes. Very, very forthcoming with everything. So hopefully you guys enjoy this slightly different, super special little bonus episode.
Enjoy it.
So, Eric Miller, thank you so much for joining us. You have a multitude of different credits, obviously screenwriting, author, I want to say production crew, if I'm not mistaken, as well, on like a multitude of different projects. So obviously you've touched on very many different aspects of, I guess, the entertainment industry as a whole, but horror as art as a whole as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. That's pretty accurate. And I'd like to say real horror. I used to work for a cleaning company and clean toilets, which is really, truly horrifying in some ways. So
probably more so even than a lot of the writing that you've done.
Exactly. Now I clean celebrity toilets, but that's a whole different.
It's very different. Can I ask if horror, just as a genre in general, is always something you've been drawn to, and like what drew you in the first place? If there were like specific films or books or something that were formative for you?
Like many people growing up in the Midwest of America and watching late night TV, I endlessly give credit to Sammy Terry, was one of the original OG horror movie hosts, and the Ghoul with his rubber spider, and George, I think it was, and they come on late night TV. So back when there was only one or two channels, or maybe three or four, but I just always gravitated to that, and seeing early Vincent Price movies and Pit and the Pendulum and the Hammer movies and Christopher Lee, all the great vampire movies. So those classics just kind of brought me into it. And then when I can't remember, I'm sure my dad always had something like that on the TV because he kind of just watched a wide variety of stuff or whatever was there. And then when I started reading, for some reason, I really don't remember what the first horror thing that I read was, but I do remember the schools would put things. Back when we could read good things in school, they put The Lottery with Shirley Jackson and some high level stuff. But and also, you can't escape the Christmas stories and Dickens and all that kind of stuff. So horror has always been kind of there, and I just gravitated to it. I thought it was cool, and who doesn't want a dungeon with a pit and a pendulum in it to have your best friends over and have them over for a party or your worst enemies. So I still like basements, and I still want a dungeon and things like that. So
maybe one day.
That was my early beginnings, and then again started reading voraciously at a very, very young age, and got into not just the classics, but discovered the as I was saying somewhere else, the Mount Rushmore of horror to me. The Mountain is The Haunting with Shirley Jackson, but early on I was reading Robert E. Howard, and people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize Robert E. Howard didn't just write Conan. He wrote a bunch of other people, but he was pen pals with Clark Ashton Smith, which I just learned that, but I knew he was pen pals with H.P. Lovecraft, and he wrote some really dark stories. And even if you've read the original Conan stories, Conan's a big beefy barbarian and the baddest ass on the planet, but he's going up against monsters and shadowy forms and magicians, and he's scared to death, even though he's the toughest guy on the planet. He's scared. So anyway, all of that just led me into, I just like the darker side of genre.
That's awesome. Who was your favorite author in the horror genre?
You know, that's a tough one. There's so many, and I have to have a list. I have to have a list up here to remember. But obviously, Stephen King.
Of course, yeah.
Yes.
The King. He's appropriately titled. I think that was foreordained. Just an amazing, amazing writer, and his ability to create real people and places and then mix the supernatural in is just what takes it over the top. But Richard Matheson, going back, I'm a Poe guy. I like Poe more than Lovecraft, even though you have to like Lovecraft, his writing anyway. But Lovecraft seemed to be more atmosphere over story to me, with some exceptions.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love when the ability to create that sense of dread and the foreboding and all that. But Poe was much more, I think, character and story oriented to me. So I'm a little bit more in the Poe, in the Poe era. But there's also people, Peter Straub, of course. I think Ghost Story is an amazing piece of fiction. Again, I'm looking at my list here. Hill House. I always like to compare The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, which is amazing on so many levels. And then Hell House, which is really the same-ish story, but told in 10, 15 different years apart and a different viewpoint on the same story. And they both occupy this amazing space. And to me, it's like twin pillars of haunted house fiction.
Yeah.
And there's so many others. Brian Lumley, I love the Necroscope series into the more modern day in the 80s and 90s. Lumley, another heir to Lovecraft, and his take on vampires is something that I just still blows my mind to this day. And then, leading and not just the vampire stuff, but he went into telekinesis and all kinds of things. So, there's so many others. And a guy that not a lot of people have really talked about, and it's strange to me. I was just talking with a friend about it. He's, I think, 3 or 4 novels. I'm not even sure if he's still alive or with us, but William Browning Spencer. He's a World Fantasy Award winner, I believe, Stoker Award winner. And he's got the same kind of sense of humor that I have in my books. His book, Zod Wallop, if again, literally Zod Wallop. It's amazing to me that a lot of people don't know the reference, but it's about a child's book author who lost his daughter, and he's living a life of seclusion, and then suddenly a madman from a local asylum, breaks out and comes over and says, "Hey, your stories were real, and we can save your daughter from the dark overlord." And it just goes into this amazing dark fantasy fiction, ripping stuff. And his Spencer's book, Resume with Monsters, is one of my favorite horror novels of all time, which is basically Office Space with Cthulhu.
Nice. Hey, man. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. And Joe Lansdale, of course, I got to give the big shout out to Joe Lansdale. That just, that weird fiction, nobody does it better than him. And such a nice guy. If you ever get a chance to meet him at a signing or something, just such a colorful, interesting, great, fun guy. And another one that, even though, he's sold 1 billion books, I run into him at the Paperback Show in Glendale, California, coming up soon every year. And I just love his Tim Powers. Again, he's not penetrated the consciousness like a lot of people should have, even though the Pirates of the Caribbean, the 5th movie, is officially credited to based on the book On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers. And I think we all kind of know that a lot more of that, the inspiration for that wasn't just a theme, right? A lot of it came out of Tim's book, but he's written just some amazing stuff and dark fantasy and New York Times bestseller, but not a household name. So I like to take every chance I can get to go, read these people.
That's fair. That's awesome. Always best to promote everyone in the horror community.
Well, and I just love getting additional recommendations for maybe authors whose works I've not just gotten around to reading at any point, or I haven't really heard very much about, exactly to your point that some of them are maybe just not household names. So
and another one is one of the classic greats, contemporary of Ray Bradbury and Matheson and all of them. It was Roger Zelazny, and there was one movie made in the 70s based on one of his books, but so far I don't think they've ever really made the movie, which is where people really get on the spectrum of the broad social consciousness of people, the pop culture consciousness. So Zelazny was just kind of writing. I always like to say he's kind of the definition of speculative fiction to me, because he's not really horror, he's not really fantasy, he's not really science fiction. It's just this melange of genres thrown in. And then even, modern day straight up horror. There's some great writers that I like. And I just, this last year, thanks to a friend, I went on, it's grim dark. So it's dark fantasy and not technically horror, but it's pretty horrifying. I have now joined the official Joe Abercrombie rabbit hole. I'm all Joe Abercrombie all day long, and I listen to audio tape the first 10 books, the whole first Law books, and the Devils, which is the new one, which is unbelievably good and laugh out loud funny for a really, really dark thing. And then I'm back and I'm rereading all of them. So I've got like 10,000 pages of, I'm just basically, I should just become Joe Abercrombie's publicist because I talk about him more than my own stuff. So.
But, yeah, I've only heard. I've not gotten to it, but I've only heard incredible things about the Devils.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is. I don't want to say it's my favorite of all of his books because there's a couple more that just The Heroes, which is one of the standalones, and The First Law, which is essentially bad pitch. It's a big battle book, but is it the best battle book ever? It just goes places and does things with characters and thoughts and action and again, it's dark. It's in the dirt and blood and spit and snot, and no one is a hero, and that's one of the metaphors of the title. But Best Served Cold, which is hardcore revenge novel in that same world. So The Devils is still very, very, very dark, but it's more accessible, I'll say. So I think the broad audience can read it, and I'm literally laughing out loud reading it. His style is very funny, but also dark. But the Devils is laugh out loud funny in places. So just kind of a masterful writer, and started off good, and he's only gotten better. And I'm not worthy, I like to say, like, wow.
Okay, so if we take a look, like that's at you've written a number of stories, and I know I believe so. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but based on everything that I've looked into, your novel from 2025, Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed, was your first full-length novel. Is that correct?
That's my first full-length novel. I've written a lot of short stories.
Yeah.
I've edited anthologies. I've had short stories in various places, and six screenplays produced with my name on them. I've sold others, and I've done other rewrites and done things that not credited for various reasons. I'm kind of broad scale. Nowhere, again, I don't write 50,000 words a day like Stephen King apparently does, or some of these people that follow the advice that I give, which is get up every day and treat it like a job and write. And even if it's good or bad or not, you're still getting a page count out. If I would actually do that, I'd probably be more prolific. But I kind of just wait for 6 months or a year, and then I wake up and go ooh, and sit down and I splat something out that really hits me. So much more of a streak writer.
That's fair. And I know that your anthology that you had edited as well, Hell Comes to Hollywood, was nominated for a Bram Stoker Award as well. Yes. I guess what I'm wondering is, I assume from your personal experiences when you're writing a story, like are there any sort of aspects of your life or experiences or situations that make their way into your stories?
Yeah. The old saying is, you probably heard this and everyone has, but write what you know. And that becomes much more authentic. And, but I will say my biggest hit movie, Ice Spiders. I've never been on skis in my entire life. And when I got the job, I called a buddy of mine who was a big snowboarder and skier. And I'm like, dude, give me some language, give me some stuff, give me the education. So, I cheated a bit, and I like reading the reviews that are like, wow, they really nailed the skiing in this. I'm like,
you're like, yes.
Yeah, but no, I think every writer does that. You take bits and pieces of yourself, either the fantasy version of yourself, or you take people that you know. In my case, places that I've been. I'm always observing. I'm always watching, and every interaction that I have, I'm paying attention to something, and it might be a little bit or a character trait or something. So some things are a little bit more heavily based, but most of them are more of a, probably 75% my imagination, but really a combination of people I've met and places I've gone and things I've done, and wherever I go, I'm just looking and going, oh, what could happen here? What kind of a weird place? I'm out on the trail hiking, and I come upon a weird waterfall, and I just can't help but imagine the little story that could take place in that kind of a setting, whether it's in a book or a story or a screenplay or something. So I early on, writing in cars all over the Midwest, going to family events and things, I would just sit in the back seat way before there's a video a video screen on the back of the seats, and no phones or anything. You could either listen to the radio, talk to your family, which that was out, or I'd look out the window and imagine things. And the family did talk a bit, but I love just looking out the window, especially at night, and looking at the flashing lights from radar towers and houses, and just wondering what's over there, what's over that hill, what's in the darkness. And I remember doing that from a really, really young age.
Wow, so just places, and then you imagine the worst possible scenario.
Go
Yeah,
wrong
well,
here.
there's that too. Yeah, and then what could go wrong? And I still do that too. You drive through a neighborhood and you look at just the average suburban houses, and I just wonder, it's not just a story thing or a horror thing, but like what's in that house?
That's it.
What's
Yeah.
in this house? What's this family
Right.
like? Is this a happy family? Is this a sad family? Is this a divorced family? Is this what exact in each one? And that I don't know who said it, but monsters aren't scary, people are scary. And when the more you read, like some of those houses have people either in a terrible relationship or kids fighting with their parents, and sometimes there's somebody locked in the basement that can't get out. And yeah, the great writer Jack Ketchum, one of the most effective horror writers ever, and wow, just eyeball peeling, literally and figuratively, violence. He said like he got everything from the newspaper. And it's true.
Yeah.
I mean, the Girl Next Door, which was a movie, I think that was the title of the novel. That was a true story that happened. And you're like, wow. Even my weird imagination, I couldn't come up with something that brutal. So, geez. But yeah, there's little bits of us and pieces of us in everything we do, and sometimes it's the bad parts. And a side thing to that, I've been lucky enough through the Horror Writers Association and just my own life and going to events and signings and conventions and working in the movie industry. I've got to meet so many people and so many great writers, and I think some of the, at least as far as I know, some of the best adjusted people that I know are the horror writers. And the joke that we all say to each other is that we get our angst out on the page. So, and also there's that's a hard drinking, hard partying group of people too. So yeah, it's good therapy, but it really is. I remember the great quote, and I left out Clive Barker. I got a big shout out to Clive Barker and the Books of Blood when those came out. I was reading paperbacks like mad back in the day, and the Books of Blood were amazing. And I do remember the great quote from Clive. He said, I forbid my mind nothing. And so he just allows his brain to go to dark places, and it's just, and that comes out on the page, and it's best when it's story and character and not in real life, of course. So yeah, there's some movies and TV things that we shouldn't be watching. I don't know, either like Last House on the Left is mine. I think I saw that at too early of an age. It didn't really, as far as I know, it didn't damage me, but also there's something about that too that I think exposing, not treating kids like kids, showing them adult things and adult situations, I think kind of helps you grow up faster, and also the safety of fiction. That's kind of the beauty of a horror movie or a horror novel. You can read the horror things, you can watch the horrifying things happening, but there's that separation, and it enables you to work through it, whether it's happened to you. As a friend of mine once said, the movies that really scared her the most were the ones that could happen to her. Like the monsters and vampires and zombies, they are not really scary for some reasons, but the ones like the abductions or the home invasions and those kind of things, that can happen. That can really happen.
Very much, yeah. Yeah, and so I guess to kind of shift gears a little bit, obviously, taking a look at your screenwriting credits specifically, you do have a good few stories that lean into like a sort of a mashup of science fiction and horror. So is that something that you've been kind of drawn to with regards to like writing stories when you're, I guess, inspired in terms of screenplays?
Yeah, I always pretty much everything I do. So, I mean, I have written some straight horror pieces, and I write straight science fiction, but I almost always put humor in. Some I do some very serious things, but it surprises me when I do something really, really, really serious, and I kind of just can't stop myself. I love mixing the genres, and I think it comes out of the story and the worlds that I create. And like I said, back with Zelazny and others, the speculative fiction that don't necessarily limit yourself to a particular genre. Like my novel, for instance, it is horror, absolutely, but it's also action, and there's a sports theme to it. Mm-hmm. There's humor, there's a love story, but when you get down to it, every story kind of has that. I mean, even in a deep, dark gothic story, there's a romance. So I think there's more mixing genres. When you get, I mean, some of the more pure ones, like horror science fiction, horror alien, horror set on a spaceship. Is that really mixing genres, or is it just a different setting? It's a good question, and it's fun to argue over those things. Is Alien a horror movie or a science fiction movie? To me, it's a horror movie, or it's just it's one of the best movies ever made. But then you get to The Haunting and others like it. Oh, it's a haunted house movie so it must be horror.
Yeah.
So, what is Dead Space? Is Dead Space horror game or science fiction game? So here we are. So, so many other works mix things in. Resident Evil is sci-fi and sci-fi and horror. So I don't know if it matters, but it does matter actually when you're trying to publish things, because publishers and studios and people, they like easily marketable and identifiable things.
Right.
And I also think people do too. They want to know, am I seeing a horror movie? Am I seeing a science fiction movie? And I think there's a lot of literary types that look down on various genres. And then also, I think there's also genre people that won't pick up Dickens or something literary and read it. And I'm a giant Tom Robbins fan. I'm a big John Irving fan. And I'm not just going to read Stephen King. I don't just limit myself to horror. I do read more horror and science fiction than anything else, but a good book's a good book. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, so sure. I'm the same, because I'm a big sci-fi fan as well. So a mashup of sci-fi and horror, I think that's the best thing ever.
That leans into some of your favorites.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it really does. But also, it gets into also what we're talking earlier about traumas and things, and be able to reveal things. Like I put in my works, I like to say that I like watching and reading things that are about something. Like, yes, I like being entertained. There's something fun that just go in and turn your brain off and watch an action movie. But you could make the argument, Die Hard, probably one of the greatest action movies ever made. Mm-hmm. It's about a family.
Yeah,
it's about a guy trying to get back with his wife and all these things. So yes, it's an action movie. Yes, it's funny. It's a mixture. But at the end of it, and the old, I used to answer the question what one of my favorite horror movies was back in the day, and I used to say Kramer versus Kramer, the old divorce drama, because it doesn't matter if it's a monster or an evil alien or a judge or it's a divorce. Someone's taking your family from you. That's horror. That's terrifying. And
for sure.
And I know for years they called Silence of the Lambs a thriller. I think they finally, Hollywood or people have finally admitted, no, that's a horror movie. That's one
a horror movie.
Oh, it is.
Ever made. It is. Is it a thriller? But the ones that are about something, and those movies like Silence of the Lambs, that's about Clarice facing up to one of the biggest monsters ever and finding in herself to be able to go up against that. Or like in my book, it's entertaining, and Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed, it's a former high school basketball star who's dealing with all kinds of traumas from his past, and he's inherited a house and a curse and these weird, violent, magical games that he plays. Yeah. But I also deal with, not on the page so much, I take a very light touch, but I deal with bullying, I deal with child abuse, I deal with spousal abuse, and those themes are in there. And I'm not belaboring them, and I'm not a mental health professional, and I'm not trying to make some big statement about them, but I don't shy away from them either, and my favorite writers don't either. And then we can allow, I want to entertain my readers, and also just as I'm entertained by others, but also maybe give them a path to say, hey, you can fight back, you can learn, there is redemption as we go through these stories. And and sometimes there's absolutely demons and the demonic forms and monsters of shape-shifting types in my book, but at the end of the day, it's about a grown-up man turning back into the little kid facing against the biggest bully you could ever imagine, and he's got to face down the bully in the climax. And I was bullied a little bit when I was a kid, not as bad as many people have, and to this day I can't stand bullies of any way, shape, or form, but that's still real. And if I'm hoping some kid somewhere, somebody will read that and go, hey, that was me, and I can stand up to it. The same way that great characters that you see in fiction, we all want to be The Rock or Arnold Schwarzenegger or whatever, and that we're all Rambo and Rocky and all that. But there's something about wish fulfillment in there, but also that gives you that gives you the edge. I mean, Cobra Kai, come on.
That's a great example.
It's a great example that you can stand up and you can be somebody. And sometimes you get your ass kicked anyway, but at least you fight back and you try to take control and you do things. So there's so many great positive examples of that. Sorry, that's off the mixing genres topic, but it also,
that's fine.
But it also ties in because there's movies like I just recently watched this year, thanks to another podcast that I was on. I watched Possum, which I actually wasn't aware of. And it's honestly more of an art film than it is a horror film, but it is one of the most horrifying films. And it's rare that a movie will stick with me. And 6 months after I've watched it now, I went back and rewatched it 3 or 4 times. Now, initially, I would have seen the poster and I would have went the other direction because it's a weird spider-looking puppet in the poster. And even though I wrote ice spiders, I'm like, I'm not a big spider guy. But that's not what it's about. That thing, that image, it's a great image, by the way. It's a wonderful poster. It just I wouldn't initially see that and go, I'm going to go watch that. But it turns out to be this unbelievably dense character study about a man who was generationally abused and has become a child's puppeteer and has this weird ass puppet that he relates to or that kind of haunts him. And is this thing alive? Is this guy crazy? And through circumstance, he has to go back and live with the family member who may or may not have abused him. And is he a child molester? Did something happened and you don't know what? And this movie, it's so powerful. It's so amazing. And the imagery and everything, it's definitely an indie movie. And nothing absolutely graphic in it, but it's absolutely horrifying. And it's like I said, it's stuck with me and it's in my head. And I'm talking about it again to other people, and it just zoomed right by me. So it's really powerful film, and absolutely not to everybody's cup of tea. I get it.
Right.
It's very slow, very methodical, and the funny thing about it is it's made by one of my favorite filmmakers. That it was actually by Matthew Holness, who, if you know Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which I'm stunned that people still don't know Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which I always pitch terribly, but is one of the greatest mockumentaries made for the BBC. And it's the polar opposite of Possum. And to me, that the same guy could create Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, which is a hilariously brilliant look at like a bad version of Stephen King turning his bad novels into the worst TV show ever made, yet pretending that it was the groundbreaking best TV show ever made, and just hilarious and wonderful and brilliant. And then X amount of years later, the same guy writes and directs Possum. And you couldn't take two pieces of horror, art, and writing and film and be more polar opposites of the spectrum. They're both horror. They're arguably both in the horror spectrum. And again, I've never met the guy. I hope I do someday. He's one of the people I just like to shake his hand and go, wow, you went places. You not only entertained me and made me laugh for decades with the brilliance of Garth Marenghi, and then you're making me think and cry with Possum. And that's talent. That's flat out talent.
Absolutely.
That sounds super heavy.
It does. It sounds great.
That's going to go on the list for us. And
it might be a fun Saturday night. Watch both back to back.
Right.
Because
that's an interesting double feature. Yeah.
Yeah, because you could never. I mean, you watch The Haunting and Hell House or read them. You get the common themes there, but these are on the opposite side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
You'll feel a full spectrum of emotions with this, by the sound of it.
Exactly. Or you might wind up in a ball crying. But I love that, and I'm very happy that I got the movie that just escaped me, and that somebody said, "No, we're going to talk about this. Watch it." And like, wow, that was amazing. So,
yeah. I guess I'm wondering, since you have so much experience kind of on both ends of things, both with writing for like novels as opposed to screenwriting for yourself, I guess, not necessarily what do you prefer, but what do you find like the biggest challenges or differences are if you're writing for screen versus writing a novel or a story?
Well, it's interesting. Screenplays neither of them are easy to write. I'll put it that way. For me, anyway. Some people just sit down and, like I said, crack out 50,000 words before lunch, or, you hear, well, I really labored hard on that. It took me 2 whole weeks to write that script. And like, really? And some great scripts were actually written that fast, believe it or not. I think actually the Wrath of Khan might have been written that fast, believe it or not. There's some stories behind that, but screenplays seem to be easier to write, but there's much more strict rules in a screenplay. Right. You're following a 3-act structure. For a feature, TV is different, but you're following a 3-act structure, and you have to have certain beats at certain places and do things in a certain page count. And the read has to be, it can't be too many words, but not enough words. It's halfway between a novel and a play with your description. And it's two things. A screenplay is not only a blueprint that if you're lucky enough to have them buy it and make it, it's a blueprint for hundreds of people to take apart. It's an architectural drawing for another piece of work. But it's also a sales tool.
Right.
It's also, you've got to have the great idea, portray the great idea in a great readable way, and then you also have to go in and pitch the damn thing, which most writers want to sit at home and write in a dark corner.
Yeah.
never come out and say, "Ooh, people." Ugh. But you've got to, you if you're lucky enough, you get in the room or go to pitch festivals, or you're getting sent around by an agent or a manager, and they may or may not have read it, but you've got to sit there and put on the dog and pony show, and that's a skill and an art, and some people are really, really good at it, others are terrible. I'm somewhere in the middle, but it's also with screenplays. That's also the connection. It's a connection between the producer, production company, and maybe the director and the stars and the writer. So, and that's tough. And the other hard thing about screenplays is, again, even though it's seemingly easy to write them, and there's way less words. There's probably anywhere from 7,500 to maybe 10,000 words in a screenplay,
Right.
and a lot of white space. So it's deceptively easy to write, but also you get the rewrites. And one of the biggest things took me probably far too long to learn, but you've got to learn how to take, I like to say this, my saying is take rewrites with grace. When you're younger, and even now, you're like, no, that scene's my baby, it has to be in there, and there are very valid reasons for many things to be in there, but you've also got to deal with a director, a star, a producer, a production company, a financier, sometimes a location manager, because the thing that you wrote isn't there, they want to change it, and if you're lucky enough to be kept on, they just keep battering you with changes.
Right.
So you have to accept that thing that you wrote, it's I guess the closest analogy in the real world would be, I don't have kids, but it's like sending your kid off to school. You've spent X amount of years raising it and molding it. It's going to be my perfect little kid. And then gets on the bus like most of us did. And now there's some teacher and a principal and other people and other kids are changing your kid. And I can only imagine that parents have that same kind of reaction. So it's the literary version of that. So you've got to learn how to make the changes with grace and also maintain your vision and fight, be able to politely fight for the things that make the story right and why.
And then accept some places, I guess, where there's no fighting to be done. And unfortunately,
sometimes, and there's tricks that people do, like you put in the extra scene that is they're going to cut out. So I would rather just fight for things. But then when you're writing the novel, it's more you. You're writing, you're the audience, you're in charge, you're the director, you're the producer, you're the star, the characters are in your head, you're doing the dialogue, you're doing the staging and the art direction and designing it all. Now, but you're also auditioning traditionally. Self-publishing becomes its own different beast, but you're traditionally doing it for an agent to read and then for a publishing company to read. So there's a certain amount of page counts, and there's grammar. You have to follow grammar. You don't necessarily have to worry as much about grammar in a screenplay. You should be. Follow all of that stuff, but you absolutely have to follow that. And that's not to say that every best-selling book, every novel ever written is actually perfect English. They're not. I've got some. I don't know what a dangling participle is, but I can guarantee you there's probably at least 2 or 3 of them in my novel and my stories somewhere. So I mean, some real editor could come in and point that out, and I'll go, "Oh, dope! I missed that. I wasn't." Well, sorry, Mr. Blythe, I wasn't paying attention in 10th grade English. But you have the chance to be a storyteller, much like screenplays. You can tell the story, but you've really got to have a good grasp of the grammar. I'm not shining on. You should absolutely hire an editor. I work with 2 different editors sometimes on things, not so much on short stories, but on my novel. I had 2 different people at different stages, and then myself with my own editing background and drilling down into that. So the novels, you got to kind of be everything to that. And again, you're also writing for an audience, but not so much that your baby is going to be pulled apart. It's you. Your soul is much more on the plate in a novel because it's all you. That's you're literally putting yourself on the plate for people to take apart with knives and forks. So and hopefully give great reviews and compliments and buy millions of copies. So it's different kinds of stress, I guess, or not. Stress is not the right word, but to me, I don't really pick. Some stories should be a screenplay, absolutely, and others should be a novel. Some of mine have gone both ways. My second novel that I'm working on now actually started as a screenplay, but I realized that it's like, I can do way better in a novel version of this. And then actually Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed started as a short story, became a novella. And then at one point I did make a screenplay out of it, went the other direction, but it didn't quite have enough room to tell the whole story and all the backstories that I wanted. So I boomeranged back to its natural habitat. And, So yeah, I'm hoping that's answering your question. To me, some stories should be a short story, some should be a novel, some should be a screenplay, some can be all of them, and that's wonderful if you can. And hopefully you get paid for all three versions.
For
That's
everything.
it, exactly. I mean, some story just needs that space to be told.
They do, and I mean,
deeply, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to the point that you were, that you mentioned earlier as well about with regards to like a screenplay, right? Getting pushback about even from people like location managers and scouts and things like that about something like that with when you're writing a short story or a novel. That's not really something that becomes as much of an issue because you can create whatever you would like to. You can set it wherever you would like to, and no one will really give you pushback for that, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, exactly. And you do have to be a little aware of that in screenplays, but you shouldn't ever write to a budget. I can, and I have some of my scripts where I literally have done so much production work on so many levels. I kind of know what I can write something to a budget, so I know what it costs. You shouldn't ever do that, though. You should just let somebody else worry about that, but don't let it cage you in. Let your imagination go crazy, because especially now with CG and visual effects and things, and direction. You can just they can do amazing things. Like when I was growing up, something like, and this is an old reference, but you couldn't have made The Matrix. Holy crap. And that's a old reference. But now look, we're 20 plus years beyond The Matrix now with the effects and things. And there's things being done so if you're sitting down and writing that, and it's actually happened to me before as a producer. I get scripts and they'll come in, you've got to break them down to do a budget. And I read the first page and it's all these big, massive effects and, extras running down the street and lava exploding. And, and I'm like, oh God, how are we going to do this for $10? And then you realize, and you also remember who you're working for. This particular company, that's just a bunch of people run down the street, scream, we tile them, repeat them, and then somebody slaps in some 2D effects, and it looks like maybe not $1 million, but it looks like that. So I kind of get trapped in my own head of thinking old school, like, geez, that cost $50 million to do the first page. So, And in some instances, it should cost $50 million to do that first page because that's when it looks really, really, really good.
That's it.
But it's totally okay to have a low budget independent horror film or a SyFy Channel movie where you don't spend that money and the audience turns their brain off and accepts what you're giving them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you don't want to limit yourself.
Well, and those things in and of themselves as well gain an amount of popularity, especially like cult status and things like that. So something like Ice Spiders obviously falls into that category where people love that they accept it for what it is, regardless of what it looks like, anything to do with that. And they accept, the story, like the plot, obviously, and what follows, like giant spiders attacking people who are trying to at a ski resort. Yeah, that's it. And they kind of accept that because those are the kinds of things people want entertainment largely when they're watching a film. So oftentimes those are the kinds of fun things that people just enjoy.
Yeah. And the thing to really focus on too is the story and the characters. I think it's Lee Child has the great statement, creator of Reacher and other things, where he says that, if I'm remembering correctly, he would always say that, how many people know who the Lone Ranger is? Everybody does. How many people remember a Lone Ranger story? Crickets.
Right.
So creating that iconic character, and that's hard. He knows it. I know it. We all know it. So we all characters, it's someone we can identify with, but it's the better version of us. And the fun one, we may not think that we're John McClane in the burning Die Hard building, but there's little bits of us want to be that guy, and he's close and accessible to us that we can pretend to be him. And video games do it great. I mean, first person shooters and all games, role playing games, you are the main character. So it's actually an easier leap in your head to become the character because you literally are the character, but also the story. And so some things it's like, okay, if it's not the best graphics in the world, sometimes it's not the best acted thing in the world, the best directed, but if it's a great story and great characters, I think that's what people want. And then the best of all worlds, when you get something that looks like Avatar, plays like Avatar, and is Avatar, like, holy crap.
That's on another level for sure.
That's on another level. When you get it all together in one ball of wax, when it again looks amazing and is amazing and great character stories, well, then you've just won the lottery, obviously.
Well, when you can be James Cameron, I guess.
I mean, people will always find a way to relate. Like you were saying, if it's not the best graphics or whatever it is, if there's a great story,
if they have a
people will
relatable
cling into that.
character in
That's it. And
there, or a
that's
good
sometimes all it
story, or
takes.
something that they themselves,
Yeah.
the suspension of disbelief for everything
Yeah,
that
that's
comes
it.
from whatever the film looks like is, it's
Well,
okay.
it goes back to that suspension. You said it perfectly. The suspension of disbelief, which we always have. But there's also, I mean, you go back to. I'm going to forget my actual film terms here. I've got to think about this. The film going through the camera, the flicker
Yes.
effect.
Okay.
I can't believe I'm actually forgetting the actual technical term, but our brain turns the flickering motion into action. It's just a series of still pictures, and video is, of course, a little bit different, but there's still frames in video. There's just more of them, and some of the processes put a lot more in, and some are less. But at the end of the day, the film running at 24 frames per second, that's the one that the eye makes into motion. And there's a certain thing about that too, with your brain tricking. When the light comes into your eye, it's actually flipped upside down because it's a prism effect with your eyeballs, and our brain flips it upside down. So what we're seeing is not what we're actually seeing.
It's a reversed image. And
and that's just physics and biology and all those things. And then when you start putting story on top of that, and you know, as I like to say, because I've worked on so many movies, when you can fool me, when I'm not looking for the seams around the edges or how did they do that, when you pull me into a movie, it's amazing. It's awesome. That's it. Or a film. I'm not looking for the edges. And as soon as I say that, if you know any directors, photographers, cinematographer, don't ever go to a movie with a cinematographer.
Oh God, I can't even imagine what the commentary would be like.
One of my best buddies, he just tears it apart. And you're like, "Would you just watch? Did you see that?" No, I didn't see that.
You're like, no, because I just want to enjoy this film.
No, but along the same lines, it's something that happened to me. It was when in the theater watching the first Lord of the Rings movie, the Peter Jackson, Fellowship of the Ring. Amazing movie. And I know Randy Cook did some of the effects, or a lot of effects people, but Randy was one of the main guys in there. I came up working with him through the years, and just a creative madman. And I'm watching a scene that turns out it's on the making of things. I had to actually, I can't remember if I called him or emailed him after I came out of the movie because it hurt my brain. The scene where Gandalf and Bilbo are having tea in the Hobbit hut, and they're putting the tea down, and the camera's moving around them. And
oh yes,
I worked with both of the actors. They're both about, I don't know exactly, but 5'6", 5'8". Yeah. And I'm watching, and I know camera tricks, and I know CG, and I'm not seeing any lines. And it turned out to
where are the cuts? Where's
the cut? Where's the scene? Where's this? And it turned out to be a vastly complicated, engineered, moving table, moving aspect ratio, moving camera, tight everything, old school filmmaking. But it literally, I'm watching Gandalf is 7-8 feet tall, whatever, and Samwise or Frodo is forgetting my Hobbit name. Sorry, is tiny. And I'm like, my brain's hurting right now. And like, how did they do that? And it's all explained in the behind the scenes.
It was a perspective change that they did live with the rotating tables and everything, like you're just saying.
And they have to do it so frequently because they have to do it with like Gimli's character as well. Because I think John Rhys Davies is like 6 feet tall. You're like, oh, this is weird. This looks really strange to see.
I think in that entire movie, I recall there being one effect that was kind of obvious to me. I think when they're standing towards the end and all the hobbits are together, it's kind of a medium shot, and you can kind of see the roto lines or something around it, but they're making them small. But I didn't care. I was so involved in such masterful filmmaking and taking such a great source material, arguably one of the greatest source materials of all time. And Peter Jackson, there's not a ballpark. He knocked it out of all the ballparks at once with that movie, plus the team with him, all the effects people, the actors. Again, that's back to that, like, wow, everything came together perfectly well. But at the same time, there's other films that are made that like we say, the suspension of disbelief. I'll watch a YouTube movie that's not quite as good, and it doesn't quite have the same emotional impact as Lord of the Rings. And is it as good as that? No, but did I enjoy it? Was it really awesome? Buddy Holly taking on the entire Russian army in Six String Samurai, one of my great favorite indie films. Is there really the entire Russian army there? No, but do I believe that he just kicked the ass of the entire Russian army? Yes. I don't know if you've seen that movie or not, but I
haven't, but I think I've heard of it.
It's an absolute hoot, and just I always like to say what a filmmaker is, and the people that put that together, the director, that's a filmmaker, and between the star and the director, they work together, and they pulled off this just weird, wonderful, strange movie that punches so far above its weight class that it doesn't matter what you spent on the movie. I don't care. I'm on the ride now. I'm on the roller coaster. and take me along for your ride.
Nice. So like speaking of all those crazy and amazing franchise and everything, I guess as one of our final questions, is there any franchise that you would like to be involved in any capacity that you would want to be in?
I would pick up trash and sweep floors to actually work on a Godzilla movie.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
Yeah.
Even
That's cool.
even an American Godzilla movie. I'm a big Toho fan. Godzilla -1 and
-1
yeah.
was incredible. That was an excellent
It's just
film.
incredible, just so
So
off the
good.
charts. But I'm starting to appreciate the later, the last couple of American ones are
yes.
actually very, very, very good. And that's we could spend a whole podcast talking about the philosophical
Yeah.
differences. It's not that one movie is good, one movie is bad. It's my taste, and I get what they're doing. They're making these big global blockbusters and iconic things, whereas arguably the Toho is making a little bit more personal, smaller, kind of country Japanese specific movies that still also have a global reach. So that again, two sides of the same coin, and different styles of filmmaking on the same subject. And I kind of appreciate that more the older I get and the movies get better. So yeah, that would be it. And I think I would totally want to work on that. But also there's so many others. There's so many books that I wish that would come out that I'm still shocked that haven't come out as series. And then things like The Expanse, which I absolutely love. The Magicians, amazing storytelling, fun stuff. And so there's a bunch of them, but that would be one. If someday I can just say that I worked on a Godzilla movie, even for one day, so I would be the happiest kid in the world. So
Awesome.
That's a crazy long-standing franchise. Yeah.
It's
7 years. How much lasts that long?
Not very many things do. It's pretty rare that you get that. So
and it's still iconic. I mean, it's probably there's probably they do the studies. I think the logo is the most identifiable is probably Coke, and then there's Frankenstein. Even if people don't know what Frankenstein is, they recognize it. And I gotta bet that there's some study out there that you show Godzilla, probably about 6 or 8 billion people instantly know what it is
immediately.
100%.
Sure. It's got global reach the way that some certain other franchises and things maybe don't. Even if they're just as long standing, they just might not have as much reach.
And it goes back to character. I mean, how much character is there? How much personality does Godzilla actually? Well, he has some. He has a kid at some point, and father figure.
Maybe he has more now than he used to in some of the older films.
But there's also something cool that he is what he was created to be, which is a literal force of nature of nuclear holocaust and fire. He doesn't need to necessarily have a personality, but again, the character is so iconic that you recognize it. And 70 years later, the movies are getting better, and they're still making lots of money, and that's a testament to the creators of that. And that it came out of a horrific real world thing.
Yes, yeah.
A world conflagration and millions of people dead, and the dawn of the nuclear era, and all of the people who died. And it's a way of dealing with collective national guilt on so many levels. And wow. And it's just a big, cool green monster blowing fire and stomping through really cool buildings. So.
Definitely one of the most identifiable monsters that film has ever had, I would say. You'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't recognize, at the very least, vaguely what Godzilla is.
The whole thing, right? It's how it looks. It's the scream, the noise that it makes.
Yes.
Everyone knows it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's identifiable. Well, anyway, listen, thank you so much, Eric, for hopping on with us. We greatly appreciate it. This was really fun.
Yeah, that was super interesting.
Is there anything that you would maybe want to plug, any upcoming projects or anything that you're working on that you'd maybe want to talk about before we wrap things up?
Go read Joe Abercrombie.
Yep.
You're the publicist, right? So
I'm the
you're the public. Yeah, you're his publicist.
I'm the unofficial publicist. So I like to say I wish I could write his 10th as good as he does. But all the people I mentioned, I of course I'm here to plug my own stuff and all that. But I am just a fan at the beginning. So all of those people that I mentioned, look them up. And if you read something and you like something, give it a review. It means so much to writers and artists and musicians and all that. But I do have my books out. You can find them. Whatever Happened to Uncle Ed's my first novel. I'm rather proud of it. And I think it goes places and does things and says things that other books don't do. And it's a kind of a weird duck, but it's also fun and funny and horrifying at the same time, and great reviews. My anthologies, you mentioned Hell Comes to Hollywood, the 18 Wheels series, 18 Wheels of science fiction, 18 Wheels of horror, which are trucking genre things. And you can find all that on bigtimebooks.com is my little publishing company, or Eric Miller Writes is a little bit more about me and a few funny stories, which needs updated, but we'll get to that later. So I'm out there and I'm around, and I appreciate the chance. And if somebody reads it and likes it, leave a good review. And if you hate it, we never met.
Yeah, just don't say anything.
Yeah, put it down and go read The Bladed Self or The Devils.
Thank you so much again to Eric Miller for sitting down with us to chat through really all of the work that he's done. It was so interesting to kind of speak about like many of his influences and everything too. And I feel like we got, I don't know how many book recommendations we got out of that conversation, but there were so many.
It's absolutely awesome. Definitely check out his work, check out his books.
Yeah.
Make sure to get them. Bram Stoker Award is nothing to joke about,
Yeah.
and like his stuff is nominated for it. So
yeah, keep that in mind. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this little bonus episode, and then end of this week we'll be coming at you with a super special review of Ready or Not, Here I Come.
yeah, finally.
But until next time, guys, stay scared and stay tuned.
Ciao, guys.